Our first speaker, everybody wanted to be last when I discussed it with them, but I pushed them. Our first speaker is Arun Gupta. He's a founder of the Indypendent and the Occupied Wall Street Journal, and was formerly the international news editor of the Guardian Newsweekly. He has visited more than 30 occupations in 21 states since October, covering the Occupy Wall Street movement nationwide for Salon, The Guardian, The Progressive, In These Times, Alternet, and other publications. Since the fall of 2011, he has helped set up Occupy newspapers in cities including Chicago, Portland, Tampa Bay. Gupta is a regular commentator on Democracy Now!, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Al Jazeera, and Russian Television or Russia Today? Television. He is writing a book on the decline of American empire for Haymarket. Our first speaker, Arun Gupta.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. It's a real honor to be here. Invited to be at the closing plenary for the Left Forum. I certainly want to thank the organizers for putting this together and inviting me. I'd like to thank my publisher, Haymarket Books, which is a great press, and they've been incredibly supportive to me over the years, even though I still haven't delivered a manuscript. I'd like to give a shout out to Free Speech TV, which is broadcasting these proceedings, and is a very important media outlet. And finally, I'm sure many folks know, but I just wanted to emphasize that there will be the march at 8 p.m. At the Red Cube in support of the people who were arrested yesterday, and it's important that we do get out of the forum and into the streets. So what I'm going to do is just kind of weave together an overview of the last few months. I met Nomi on a bus in Baltimore. She was from Wisconsin and had been involved with Occupy Wall Street. She was part of Occupy Judaism and fondly recalled the Yom Kippur services she attended at the occupation with hundreds of other people. Nomi explained that for the first time, she and many of her friends were able to combine the spiritual and radical dimensions of Judaism. The occupation gave them a fuller sense of being by unifying their religious, cultural, and political life. The conversation felt silent as the bus rolled along. Suddenly, Nomi turned to me and excitedly announced that I met my girlfriend at Liberty Plaza. I smiled and responded, "That's why Occupy Wall Street matters." The movement was more than a movement. It was transformative and even life-changing. And it allowed people to experience themselves as complete social beings, not just as angry and outraged protesters. Nomi said she was no longer involved in the movement, which I thought was yet more evidence why the actual occupations were so important. Just a couple of weeks earlier, my partner Michelle Fawcett and I visited one of the last remaining occupations, Occupy Fullerton in Orange County. We heard they were having an Occupalooza. Being a warm, sunny day like it usually is in the OC, we cruised Fullerton's insipid architecture until we happened upon the incongruous sight of a tent village. It was a familiar scene, about 40 tents, most shielded by blue tarps, and small knots of people playing music, smoking, and lounging in the afternoon sun. The party was on top of the hill, overlooking the Occupy Fullerton camp, we were told. Before hiking up there, we encountered Wolf, a 25-year-old transgender native of Fullerton. Wolf had been involved for only a month, but had jumped feet first into the movement. He explained how Occupy Fullerton is lobbying the city council to pass resolutions on issues ranging from Citizens United to predatory debt. His cool-headed explanation of how credit card companies trap unsuspecting students in a cycle of debt gave way to a passionate embrace of the Occupy movement as a welcoming space for him and his intersex partner. As we interviewed Wolf, John Park hung on the edge. When we turned to Park, a Korean American with 2 children in college, he launched into a blistering critique of the ideology of free trade, expertly citing the academic literature on the subject. That a middle-aged immigrant computer programmer could find common cause with a transgendered youth activist speaks to the raw ideological and emotional power of the twin slogans, "We are the 99% and Occupy Wall Street." Sure, there was abundant anger and frustration around America before Liberty Park was occupied. But the occupation crystallized who is to blame for the economic crisis and who are the legitimate people. Anyone could walk into the public space, share their stories, find people with similar grievances, and help build the mini societies. For many, it created an organic, holistic community. The Occupy movement, though, wasn't just a rejection of Washington and Wall Street. It revealed the failings of liberals, unions, and the left. New activists didn't first have to master volumes of social and cultural theory. They didn't have to attend grueling anti-oppression workshops or learn to pepper their comments with academic jargon to join the movement. Neither did it require consultants, focus groups, or polling to occupy the center of American politics with a radical message. And the form was not the same old rallies with canned chants, pre-printed protest signs, and preaching to the choir. The loss of public spaces is an undeniable setback, however. Creating democratic town squares in the face of power attracted the huge number of people who brought the movement to life. Now that nearly every one of the hundreds of occupations that popped up last fall have been booted out of their communal space, it's tempting to say the next phase, Occupy 2.0, is underway. No doubt, Occupy has an enviable brand, significant public support, and energized movements around housing, labor, finance, electoral reform, corporate accountability, faith, the food supply, and pretty much any issue you can think of. The secret of Occupy's strength lies in its ability to disrupt power in simple ways, like the mic check, and grand, such as by occupying public space, even if that space is now a rarity. Occupy Wall Street does retain a disruptive capacity that defies prediction. It can be seen from Occupy the SEC, which released a stunning 325-page critique of the VOCA rule, to Occupy Our Homes, which has successfully engaged in more than 24 foreclosure and eviction defenses thus far. These are victories that are symbolic, putting financial regulators on notice that they are being watched, and real by keeping families in their home. Victories are essential because they sustain the movement, yet it's still in its infancy. Compared to the problem today in terms of occupying our homes, 4 million families have lost their home to foreclosure since 2007. And compared to the scope of resistance in the past, some historians claim that in 8 months in New York City in 1932, 77,000 evicted families were moved back into their homes by unemployed council activists. To notch far-reaching victories, the Occupy movement needs allies with millions of members and access to resources. In short, the beleaguered labor movement, which has found a lifeline in Occupy. There's a growing recognition that organized labor has been boxed in by laws and rulings that have blunted the strike, its most potent weapon. Labor organizers across the country recognize occupiers can take risks unions are unable to or are unwilling to. By moving beyond the workplace as the locus of the struggle between labor and capital, Occupy has introduced creative tensions that benefit unions, even if they feel their toes are being stepped on. The December 12th West Coast port shutdowns, organized by the Occupy movement, caused friction with the leaders of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, who opposed the blockade attempts from Long Beach to Vancouver. But when occupiers started organizing flying pickets to aid the Longshore Union in confronting an agribusiness giant, EGT, that was trying to freeze out the union workforce at the port of Longview in Washington state, the corporation blinked and struck a deal with the union. Relations are being tested further as some occupiers are pushing for a general strike on May Day, while many labor activists call it unrealistic, without months of education and organizing among the rank and file. Many occupiers respond, if not now, when, and point out that Occupy Wall Street would have never happened without audacious risk-taking. Occupy and organized labor may also find themselves on opposing sides as unions throw money and troops into President Obama's re-election battle, while the Occupy movement mobilizes to occupy the Democratic National Convention and its Republican counterpart. While Obama has adopted Occupy Wall Street ideas in running on a platform of economic fairness, Occupy Wall Street is no left-wing Tea Party. Having interviewed hundreds of occupiers across the country, it's safe to say they fall into three camps. Those who didn't support Obama in 2008, those who voted for him last time but will not this time, and, to be honest, the plurality who say they will hold their nose and vote for him. Nonetheless, they all agree that the electoral system is broken, which is precisely why they flock to the Occupy movement as an alternative method of building and leveraging power. Now, power means different things to different people. Many people involved in the Occupy movement do want to enlist in policy battles and engage in electoral campaigns. But the beating heart of the movement is about creating societies that embrace the vibrancy of daily life instead of reshuffling the political class in Washington. Back at Occupy Fullerton, when we finally climbed up the hill to get to Occupalooza, we found a bowl-shaped grass amphitheater fringed by palm trees and a house band jamming with a few dozen people grooving to the music. Being California, there were frisbees, sunbathers, and stoners. Being winter, kids were sledding, even if it meant they were shrieking as they bounced along a dirt gully gouged from the hillside. Lupe Barrios eyed our camera and notepad, bounced over to chat us up. He said he was from Tucson. His right calf proclaimed "Hecho on San Diego," and he said, "I'm here for fun, not politics." But within a minute, he was talking about how immigrant rights are workers' rights and said, "My mother lives in a cage wherever she goes because of social and class oppressions." It was festive, giddy, and unpredictable. The left is abundant in anger. The Occupy movement has turned that into joy. This country is floundering in despair. Occupy has given countless people hope. It is these emotional truths that make the difference. If the movement becomes predictable, the faces all look familiar, and the organizing feels like drudgery, then it will have lost. For now, no one knows what will happen next, and that's a wonderful thing. Now, that's where it's supposed to end, but I do want to give a quick addendum of about 2 minutes to talk about yesterday, because I think it is very important to talk about where the movement is at this moment. One journalist I talked to who's done terrific work, and Nathan Schneider, who was out there all day, I was there part of the day, he said it was like 6 months of Occupy in one day. It went from occupation to festival and carnival to confrontation, to eviction, to defiance. There was a clear narrative thread, and that's very important. That's what I've learned as I've gone across the country. The telling of stories are what matters. The problem is at this point, the narrative is becoming about police and protesters, cameras and brutality. Now, it's not my role as a journalist, I know others think otherwise, to tell the movement what to do. I try to more raise questions, listen to people, and make observations. And I think fundamentally that militancy is important, and that has become an unfortunate controversy over the issue of black bloc tactics, because numerous times black bloc tactics have worked and have been very effective in protecting people. But nonetheless, I think there is also a danger of misdirected militancy. We need to be thinking more about strategic militancy, such as the December 12th port shutdowns, that may involve battles with cops, but they are about something fundamentally different. In this case, it was trying to show power against capital and build links with workers. I saw the same thing in the Inland Empire, where protesters successfully used black bloc tactics to defend themselves against the police, and they were able to aid the campaign of warehouse workers there who were trying to organize against Walmart. But when yesterday we left from the Left Forum and we were marching up Spruce Street, you know, I'll admit, I was in the middle of the street, it was giddy, I was enjoying it, there was a sense of empowerment in yelling, whose streets, our streets. But the question is, was it strategic? Now, I'm no pacifist. I believe the police are often our enemies. In fact, virtually all the time they're our enemies. But they're not the ones who crash the global economy. And we make a mistake if we let this become a narrative about police and protesters. And we need to think about targets. And we need to start creating discipline while not leaving aside the carnival and theater. What I saw a lot of yesterday was the crowd was surfing on emotion, not thinking through strategically, because we haven't created the structures yet. And we need to think about how are we actually going to do that. And I think one of the most important things, and I direct this to every single person in here and who's been at the Left Forum, that the movement really needs intellectuals. It needs organizers. It needs all of you. It needs you to engage with the movement at every single level. There's probably 10,000 years of organizing and intellectual experience in this room. And the problem is too many people are still sitting from afar making pronouncements when they should be doing the difficult work of going, and it is difficult. But the movement is in a very fragile state at this point, and it's like a glass egg. And there are fractures appearing in it. We don't know what's going to be born, but as to echo Francis, we need to keep it together so we can see what is born instead of letting it fall apart. So I would hope that people go out of here and think about how exactly they're going to engage in the movement to help it create something that'll last for years and really transform our society and social relations. Thank you.